I did a YouTube search for PhD summaries, for summaries that were under 4 minutes, and I found only 2 PhDs that had more than 1,000 views. Now, PhDs can be dry and difficult to explain in short, so part of the reason I'm wearing these glasses is to make PhDs cool again and hit 1,000 views. On occasion, folk ask me what my PhD is on, so approaching the final stretch of the process, this is a short video explaining where the idea came from. When I was in undergrad, almost every course had a component of HIV, and I was tired of hearing about HIV by the time I graduated. So I swore that I would not write about HIV. But then I asked the question, why do I feel this way? And is it possible that other young people feel this way too? And could this apathetic feeling be part of the reason why HIV is still so rampant in South Africa generally, but in young people specifically? I ended up writing my honours thesis on othering, or vulnerability denial, in young 20-something-year-old university students. The research found that although the interviewees acknowledged that HIV was a problem, it really was a problem that they needed to consider and act upon at some other point, or for other people to think about. This was interesting because people in the most at-risk age group were distancing themselves from risk, and this did not translate into prevention behaviors. I still recall some of the responses and thinking and feeling astonished that young people chose to identify with the invulnerable parts of their identity, that is, conservative religious backgrounds, and to disidentify with the vulnerable aspects of their identity, that is, their age. I decided to look at vulnerability denial in more depth in a master's thesis. My supervisor then encouraged me to develop a quantitative study using a well-established social psychology paradigm, a mortality salience experiment, where we got people to think about their personal mortality. Experiments have at least 2 conditions. One condition exposes the subject, in this case a university student, to a stimulus. In this case, the stimulus was thinking about what it would be like to experience dying. After getting the participant to write about that experience, we asked them to rate their personal risk of getting a chronic disease, and also to attribute risk to 4 race groups. The second condition does not expose the subject to the stimulus. In this case, we got people to think about dental pain instead of death, and then asked them about risk of getting a chronic disease. We found that people who had thought about death were more likely to deny vulnerability to getting a chronic disease than those who had thought about dental pain. This showed that the mortality salience condition increased vulnerability denial and also increased risk attributions to other race groups. What I didn't tell you is that we first tried the experiment using HIV and the experiment bombed out. Later we saw that the level of vulnerability denial and risk attribution for other groups was statistically higher in both the experiment and control groups for HIV. This means that considering HIV, which is still hugely associated with bodily decay and death, frightening stuff, even though there are medications available to prevent this, was far more likely to cause vulnerability denial and risk attributions to different others than just thinking about personal mortality. One interpretation is that HIV generates potently valent emotions and sky-high levels of vulnerability denial in both the experiment and control conditions, and this is why the experiment bombed out. The take-home is that getting people to think about death, threatening stuff, and HIV caused denial of personal vulnerability, a kind of numbing effect. So if this is the case, we need different tools to help us think about disease prevention and health generation and maintenance. This is where the idea for the PhD was conceived. If threatening messages have had little positive effect on young people, what could we possibly do to ensure better health and improved prevention strategies for young people?